And I think it's very easy to go from thing to thing to thing to thing in a day. You might have eight, nine meetings in a day. And at the end of it, can you might have had a strong feeling about your second meeting or a really interesting idea about your fourth meeting, but you haven't maybe had time to digest that. And so I've just realized more and more I gotta provide those little spaces to just like let it all kind of settle down
Yeah.
and process things.
Welcome to Conversations with Nick, a podcast that invites remarkable everyday people to share their experiences of navigating life, love, and leadership. My name's Nick Ferguson, and I'm really glad you've decided to listen in on today's conversation with our guest, who has been a friend for over a decade since me and my family relocated to Gloucestershire back in 2012. During that time, I've observed his passion for serving some of the most vulnerable and exploited individuals, both here in the UK and abroad, and have also witnessed firsthand his ongoing commitment to developing his business acumen and leadership skills. As the Chief Strategy Officer of a social enterprise in East Asia, he currently oversees the business strategy and management training for survivors. So, without any more delay, it's my joy to invite Naffy Arrowsmith to the podcast. Naffy, welcome.
Wow, thank you so much. Quite an introduction. I'm very flattered. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I love watching your content, and so it's really nice to be here to have the opportunity to talk in this way.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. And I'm really excited for the conversation. So one of the things that I like to do whenever I'm having a conversation is just start off by asking a question that gives you an opportunity to give, our listeners, our watchers, a little bit of an insight as to who is Naffy.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I am the Chief Strategy Officer at Starfish Project, which operates to enable women to experience freedom from exploitation and trafficking. And we do that by creating safe jobs and career opportunities for people. So that's kind of professionally the main part of my professional identity. I guess more broadly than that, I like to think of myself as a thinker. I'm quite academic, I'm quite wordy. I love to learn and to study. I recently been given the title of Laoshi, which means teacher in Mandarin, as I've started teaching classes on management here. And so it's kind of an honor to get that honorary title from my students. And most importantly, I'm a husband of an incredible woman called Shakina, that you know well, who I've been married to for 9 years.
Fantastic. So you are based in East Asia, and giveaway there, you speak Mandarin.
Well, I try every day. I feel like a second language is as much speaking as it is failing to speak, you know. But yeah, I do my best.
Well, I've personally been on a call with you where I've seen you with your team, your leadership team, and you communicating by way of translating and stuff. So I'm, you do well. You do well.
Thank you,
All right.
thank you.
So
I appreciate
so as I said, thanks for sharing that up front because I think it's just helpful for people to kind of get a little bit more context, and we're going to dive in a little bit more. Now, I've had the privilege of observing, some of your leadership development over the last decade. However, for listeners and watchers, that wouldn't be the case. So can you just share as much as you are able to, just something about your leadership journey to date, including maybe, if as much as you can, a little bit about what you do now?
it. Sure. Yeah, so I'd say my professional leadership journey started more with necessity, to be honest. So my first job was in a supermarket. I was moving stock around and trying to make ends meet. And while I was at uni, and I was really bored actually, and I had the opportunity to study. how to be a manager, to learn how to open the shop, close the shop, deal with things as they come up. And there was an extra £2 an hour if you learn how to manage and how to open the store. So I was eager to do that at the time. That £2 meant I really felt it, and so it started very much out of necessity. And my leadership journey now has evolved into really trying to use what I've learned as a way to serve other people. And so my passion professionally has really come to be about trying to provide opportunities for other people to thrive, and especially people who economically haven't had opportunities that they've always deserved. So now I help part of a executive team of social enterprise. We have nearly 100 people in 3 or 4 countries, multiple cities. So yeah, that means that leadership now looks incredibly varied for me and quite a bit more complex for when I started. But it's an honor and a privilege for sure.
Brilliant. And I guess that leads on well to something that I was curious about in terms of your leadership has spanned now 3 continents, yeah, and you're currently in East Asia, and I know that, like you said, you started out here in the UK, and started out in retail, and you've kind of gradually been offered different opportunities where you've been able to grow and develop in your leadership, and I guess the context where you are now in East Asia, and also the nature of those whom you serve, looks completely different to when you were doing retail in the UK. So what does leadership look like in your context?
Yeah, I think it's cross-cultural, and that's a really major component to it. That is really significant. We mentioned languages, and there's a degree of humility that's necessary from that. I am making big mistakes all the time in my language and saying something, people laughing, and I'm like, oh, I'm not quite sure that wasn't an intended joke. So I've clearly got something wrong there. But a lot of it does look like walking with people day to day who are kind of stepping into management for the first time. And those are what we call survivor leaders. So women that have escaped situations of exploitation, who started off on the production line making jewelry in our social enterprise, but now have stepped into actually leading and managing other people in various different roles like accounting, photography, marketing. And so yeah, a lot of what I do is thinking about how to help them thrive, how to put the structures in place, the training, and then also making sure the business is viable so that those opportunities can happen. So yeah, what does it look like? It looks cross-cultural. It looks complex as a real intersection between the social and the enterprise.
Yeah.
And there's a constant marrying of those things. But yeah, it's a little bit different from where I started. That's for
Mm,
sure.
And I guess when you say it's a little bit different, it sounds vastly different, you know. So can you just say something more? Because I think the context here is important. Just say something more about when you say survivors, when you say those who have been exploited, and helping them to gain match skills, employability skills, developing them in management and into leadership from where they're coming from. Just say a little bit about that as much as you can, because I appreciate the nature of your role and the nature of the organization comes with a degree of sensitivity as well. I'm very mindful of that. And so where you're able to, could you just maybe just expand a little bit more?
Sure, sure. Yeah, so a lot of the women who come to work at Starfish Project have essentially come from originally from the countryside, and in where I am, there's a major difference between sort of urban and countryside in terms of what that means for opportunities. And so a lot of the women have been coerced into situations of exploitative work, be that in kind of massage parlors or bars and things like that. And so what we do, we have teams who go and make connections and befriend women in those situations, and when they're ready, offer an alternative job at us at Starfish Project, first making jewelry. And what that means is that a lot of the women coming didn't actually get to finish a basic education, what in the UK would be compulsory education, up to secondary school. Lots of the women never got to finish that education. So we do a lot in terms of trying to fill in those educational gaps. There's also a whole area of holistic care where we offer like counselling and those kinds of childcare services, all of those kind of wraparound services as well. And then once they've kind of had a chance to settle a little bit in their life, in their new life working at Starfish Project and receiving some of those services, it's about saying, okay, what are your dreams? What is the potential that you would like to unleash professionally, and what that could mean for you and your family. And that's kind of when I mostly start to interact with the women, is at that point. And I'm simultaneously thinking, how can we run the business in such a way that is going to maximize those kinds of opportunities and still pay all the bills? So yeah, hopefully that gives a little bit more of a sense.
Yeah, so there's something there about, you know, doing what as an organization you feel in a sense a level of social responsibility to be able to really help those women who have come from those experiences and those backgrounds, whilst at the same time building a in a sense an organization that's financially viable and sustainable and can actually create more opportunities for similar women to be able to come through. And that's where your business strategy is required.
Yes. Yeah, and I think over the years, what I've come to consider and appreciate is how important it is to actually integrate those things in a social enterprise. I think the biggest sort of pitfall, I think, for organizations like ours is to think we'll do business and make the money over here and then use it to do social impact. And a big thing for us has been actually how do we bring those into unison? And a big part of that is saying, well, actually, if we're releasing the potential through training of all of these women who were the staff in our business, that is only going to help our business. And so that's where training and development becomes a kind of not just a good thing to do, but also an essential part of our financial viability as well.
Yeah, so empowering, developing is good for both the survivors as well as the organization, and the two kind of work very well together. And that's kind of what you've really been building over these years with your team, which is great. Which is great. Okay. So I'm always fascinated. Thanks for that, because I think that gives a little bit more context in terms of where you are and what you do, as much as you can share. Uh, I think I'm always fascinated by, key influential figures. Okay, so I guess a question, we're all influenced by, significant others in our lives. I see this all the time in my work. Both as a therapist and as a coach, I see it. Uh, so I'm curious from your perspective, as part of your leadership journey, who were some of the key influential figures in your life, and what would you say are some of the things you've maybe learnt from them?
Yeah. Well, the first one's a little bit awkward to say, but the first person I would say is you. It's Nick. Nick's been my coach. You've been my coach for several years, and the biggest thing I've learnt from that, I think, is very much about leading from the inside out. Is kind of how I would
Mm, mm,
try to sum up several
mm,
years of coaching sessions.
mm.
Um, so yeah, you've been a really big influence on my leadership development.
Thank
Um,
you, thank you. And just to say, that has been an absolute privilege. Just to make that really clear, I've said that before. As I said, it's a real joy to work with you, and I'm in the position where I'm in a very fortunate position where I get to choose who I work with, and and I would always choose to work with people like you, Nafi. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so other people that come to mind, I've worked under two very impressive entrepreneurs who happen to be female entrepreneurs. So one of those is Katie from Treasure Seekers in Gloucester, and the other one's Jenny, my boss here, the CEO of Starfish. And I think what I've learnt from both of them is very much what it takes to make a social enterprise possible. So things like networking, funding, the kind of the nuts and bolts of what it means to for something like this to be possible. So I've learned a huge amount from them. The other people who come to mind are my college or my university lecturers, actually,
Mm.
um, and mostly because they always taught me to ask questions. And I remember I once, as a very kind of plucky, arrogant 21-year-old, went to one of my lecturers and said, I disagree with your theory. I disagree with everything you've just said, his whole PhD thesis.
Mm.
And he said, Oh, that's really good that you're thinking that way. If you want to disagree with me further, you should explore these three authors. And the humility and the openness to challenge and the honesty and not taking yourself too seriously, I think are things that I try to emulate in the kind of environment that they created for
Mm.
me.
It's brilliant, brilliant. So there's a broad range, and you've got the entrepreneurial side in terms of I think it was Vicky from Treasure Seekers in the UK,
Katie.
Katie, sorry, and then you're basically the lady you work with now at Starfish at Starfish Project. Um, that's the entrepreneurial side, and then you've got the academic side, and I love what you said there in terms of your lecturer, the humility in that, but asking you to, well, helping you to see the importance of questions and to question further. And I can just, it actually reminds me of a book that the courage to be disliked. That's the kind of similar narrative as you said that. That's what reminded me of. This whole dialogue between a student and a lecturer, and the learning that comes through that process of just being able to have permission to ask questions as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really funny analogy. It feels very, having read that book as well, it feels very a very good kind of picture of what that experience was like.
Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, so you have been able to describe, some of the characteristics of those who have been influential in your leadership journey. I'm I'm wondering, how would you imagine your team, who you lead, would describe your leadership?
That's a good question. Um, I think two things come to mind. The first thing would be endless reflection. So we have a meeting once a week with kind of the whole teams, maybe the whole sort of team involved in the business sides. There's maybe 40 to 50 people on that call in multiple locations and some in person. And I always ask a reflection question at the beginning, something like, how what went well in the last week? What can you learn from that to apply for the coming week? What didn't go so well? How can you apply that? Um, and various variations on that. But I think people either love that or find it very very tiring having to reflect all the time. But that's definitely been something that come to be known for, I guess, either for good or bad. Um, the other one I would say is there's definitely, if I'm honest, a pace to my leadership. We always say, no one is ever bored at Starfish Project. It's there's it's we're always moving, we're always innovating, Um, it's busy, and I found myself to have a knack for finding good use for any extra time that we might have, and how to use it. So yeah, I think there's a pace to it, but also um, a lot of reflection.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And it's interesting, even as you say that, what comes to mind is those two can actually seem like opposing forces. You know, this idea of reflecting and pace. How does one reflect when one's moving at pace? But actually, what you've done by doing those presenting opportunities on a weekly basis to actually pause, slow down, and reflect, is intentional. And I would guess that the team, even though that might feel uncomfortable at times, would benefit from that hugely.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah. Okay. So they would say that there's a pace to your leadership, but there's also you create opportunities to reflect, or reflection is a big value of yours. Okay. Cool. Again, you've just said that some might find it a little bit more uncomfortable than others. So again, thinking about your context, how would you describe I guess, some of the challenges then of leading in your context?
I think the biggest challenge that comes to mind is just the complexity, probably, of what we're trying to achieve is a significant challenge. We're trying to bring social and enterprise together. Part of that means that we're dealing with people that have some quite intense trauma in their backgrounds. You can't really ignore that, even in the more businessy work aspects of it. Is obviously gonna have an impact. And I'm not a psychologist. I'm not an expert in that, but just by nature of those experiences that people are bringing, we have to become aware of that in our management and how we go about things. So there's those kinds of internal complexities, um, and then there's the kind of external complexities around tariffs and trade wars and pandemics and AI and all of that. For us, I think, as a job creation social enterprise, essentially,
Mm,
the question is always, how do those things affect the viability of the jobs that we're creating? And so I think where other businesses might have a bit more freedom to, let people go if there's a big business opportunity and the opportunity is finished, to let people go, or swap out AI for something. Um, our entire purpose is about creating long-term safe jobs, and
mm,
so everything for us is about, okay, how in light of this external challenge, how do we use it or protect ourselves from it in order
mm.
to ensure the long-term jobs for the women can still be there. So um, yeah, I think the challenge is the complexity of those two things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, even the example you just gave there, in terms of the external pressure of some of the innovative advancements and the changes that are coming with the introduction of AI, and where we're seeing that just go to extremes very, very quickly. And actually, your ultimate goal as an organization is job retention, because that provides stability and safety for those who have come from exploitative backgrounds. You can see where those things kind of can become quite, they clash almost. And to be able to kind of keep that front of center of your mind in terms of keeping these individuals in work, that in itself, I can see why that would be a potential challenge, with the external pressures coming in to change things, to make cuts, and all of those types of stuff. um in terms of the again, just thinking about those whom you do work with, I'm wondering what there's trauma. You mentioned trauma. As a team, as a leadership team, you mentioned counseling, but But on a day to day, what are you needing to be, I guess, mindful of? What are you needing to navigate, and how does that present potentially as a challenge as well?
Yeah, it's a great question that I'm, often wanting to keep asking myself as well. And I think the number one thing I realized very quickly is that providing safety and a sense of safety in interactions, in the midst of organizational change, in the midst of whatever's happening, day to day, big or small, maybe very practical business challenges, the number one thought for me has to be in the context of this, whatever this is, how do I create an environment of psychological safety as a manager, as a leader? I think that's probably the number one thing that I've become very, very cognizant of. And
Mm,
when people don't feel safe and when you can sense, and I think I've tried to learn to spot body language and things like that, to
mm,
notice
mm,
when somebody clearly doesn't feel safe. um, I've tried to remember that whatever comes out of that is not likely to be fully personal to me.
mm,
If somebody is feeling a very disproportionate, what seems like a disproportionate emotional reaction to something very practical, that's probably not personal to me. And so, unless I'm being told it's about me,
yeah,
then
of
then
course.
then don't try not to assume that it's personal. I think um yeah, but imperfectly. It's how we manage this. We
Mm,
do our best and try to be reflective and um, but also I think, and I don't know, obviously there'll be experts out there like you and others in these kinds of areas. But I think one thing that became apparent to me quickly is to not sort of other people based on what we might know or
mm,
assume about their background. And I came to sort of realize that, well, actually, when I don't feel safe, I might have disproportionate emotional reactions to something very personal, and not to see it as I'm the helper, I've got it all sorted.
mm.
But actually, well, we're both human beings that have different baggage, and how do we try to create a good environment for everyone to thrive? And um, yeah, that's how I've tried to approach it, is to think, what helps me feel safe when I don't feel
Yeah,
safe, and how can I try and offer that to others in a work setting?
yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Okay. So with the challenges of leadership, and you will have them, on multiple levels. Uh, there's something quite important about being able to maintain, I guess, your own well-being, your own health, so that you're not running on empty. With that in mind, how would you say how do you switch off? What do you do to fill your cup?
Yeah, I have to be honest that it's not something that's always come naturally to me. I've had to learn it, and still, still learning about it. I think more recently, I've actually started using a mindfulness app that I found really helpful. Just giving the space and permission to stop and breathe, and there's an exercise I like. It's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can feel, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. So I actually find those mindfulness practices very, very helpful, um, particularly at the end or the beginning of a day, to kind of switch off from the stress that can come with leadership challenges. Yeah, also just practically, I've learnt to turn my phone off sometimes. I went on a holiday recently. Me and my wife Shakina, we went on holiday and decided that we would both turn our phones off for 3 days, which felt like a real challenge.
Mm,
Um, and you find yourself just like fidgeting, when the other person goes to do something and you're like, what do I do, and but actually that's become a bit of a practice for me of trying to create times just to reduce the level of stimulation, I think,
Mm, mm.
and try to get some quiet.
That's that's interesting, isn't it? And even, you know, just that awareness that there are so many things that are, attracting our attention, and recognizing what those things are, and putting practices in place to maybe put them to one side for albeit short periods of time, just so we can kind of, again, this idea of giving ourselves space to be familiar with just our space and our own thoughts and just what's in our immediate proximity. Just like you say, those kind of mindfulness practices are really helpful for doing that, aren't they? Just grounding and just becoming aware. And yeah, they can help us just to reset in those moments where things might be really demanding.
And sometimes I think what it is, as I've grown in leadership, I've taken on more meetings and emails and a greater variety of things. And I think it's very easy to go from thing to thing to thing to thing in a day. You might have 8, 9 meetings in a day, and at the end of it, can you might have had a strong feeling about your second meeting, or a really interesting idea about your fourth meeting, but you haven't maybe had time to digest that. And so I've just realized more and more I gotta provide those, yeah, those little spaces to just like let it all kind of settle down
Yeah,
and process things.
yeah, that's good. Just came to mind. What do you notice most when you're not putting those practices in place? When you're not switching off? When you're not filling your cup? What do you start to notice about yourself? What do you start to notice about your interaction with others? What do you start to notice about your leadership and your leadership effectiveness?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think uh there's a sense of um in Mandarin there's this word jiaoji, and it means like you're kind of irritable, everything feels over urgent, and there is a sense of proportionality, I think, because you might be faced with things during the day that are, people more and more bringing problems, and I think as I've gone up the chain, that the size of the problems coming to me have got bigger, and so I noticed that proportionality becomes really, really important, and I think that's one of the things I notice that is missing sometimes. Smaller things can feel bigger than they really are, and I think that becomes really influential actually then in your decisions and how you go about things.
Mm, mm, mm. And when things are when you're finding it's challenging to keep things in proportion, and you see that it's impacting maybe some of your decisions, can you, again, where you can, where it's appropriate, can you think of any examples of where you've seen that play out and it's had a negative impact that you've learnt from?
Yeah, let me think about that. Yeah, I think one example that comes to mind was I've had to oversee a lot of system changes, and if you want to become unpopular in an organization quickly, you will oversee a lot of system changes, and uh, and I remember somebody several years ago who no longer works for us was quite resistant to this change, and I remember feeling quite threatened. I was a slightly more junior position then, and I felt quite threatened by this resistance, and uh, I was so busy in the details of actually trying to get this change done, and the technical challenges of it and the time frames, and that this kind of this resistance to the change, which is very normal, very typical, I didn't have the kind of energy in the bank to give it the emotional intelligence I think that it needed, and I feel like the kind of firing off quick emails to try and put out a problem quickly, and then you're like, oh, that actually didn't come across very well, and so then you're dealing with a conflict which is a much bigger issue than somebody taking a while to get on board with the system. So yeah, that was a time where I thought really got to learn to if an issue is requiring more emotional intelligence than what I have at the time, um, to try to be mindful of that.
Mm.
And I'm still learning that, but to try to think, this thorny situation. Am I in the best frame of mind to handle this right now?
Mm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, no,
it's a good
thank you.
question.
No, thank you. Again, it just emphasizes the importance of self-awareness, you know,
Mm,
and just kind of really being able to again notice when you might need to just slow down with whatever pathway you're heading, and that in leadership, not everybody is in the same carriage necessarily. It might be on the same train, but they might not be in the same carriage. You might be at a carriage further up, and it's about how can you help people to journey with you. Um, yeah, and people are, we all struggle with change. So we're gonna come into to land, yeah, because I'm mindful of your time. I know you're busy with the commitments that you have, and I also know we're on a slightly different time zone. Okay, so we're going to come into land, but one of the things that I'd just like to ask you before we kind of go into just a kind of couple of wrap up questions, is what with everything that you've learned so far and where you are right now, what are your hopes for the future impact of your leadership?
yeah. At Starfish, I really hope to ensure women can in our organization can grow as far as they want to grow. You know, that there's no barriers in the way of their potential. Um, that yeah, I would love to see people competing for my level of job. I'd love to see um kind of senior leadership, board leadership. I want to see people who've been in power from inside the organization um absolutely thriving in all levels of leadership. Um I think beyond Starfish, I have been feeling more and more that I would love to share more of what I've learned about social enterprise business strategy with kind of organizations that are just starting up, maybe, and figuring out there's so much there I look back on and think, oh, if I only knew this, 5 years ago. I used to run a fair trade shop, for example, and I often now think, oh, I wish I knew this about e-commerce, or I wish I knew this about, business strategy then, how differently I would have done it. So, yeah, I'd love to be able to share some of what I've learned with more people trying to do social good with business.
Fantastic. So on the one hand, continuing to see the women that you work with really be empowered and have opportunities to continue to flourish to the capacity that they're able to, the potential that they're able to reach, and to be, involved in that process from a strategic level, but also being able to take some of what you've learned over the years and some of the ups and downs and the challenges, all the insights that you've gained, and you know I'm also where you've got an MBA at Durham now. You've studied. I know you said right up front that there is an academic side to you, and I think that's something that's of significant value to people. So being able to take your academic experience, your business knowledge, MBA at Durham, as well as just your experience on the ground of being in a kind of executive level leadership in the social enterprise space, being able to take some of that and share that with others. There will be people out there who will hugely benefit from that, no doubt. So yeah, I can see where that vision, I can see that playing out, and yeah, excited for you in that respect as well. And we will, as part of this our conversation, I'm going to put details of just how people can find you. I know you've got a very strong presence on LinkedIn as an example, and you're regularly sharing things on there which are really helpful. So we'll put all those details in the description so that people can find you and connect with you. Because who knows, there may be some opportunities that people might reach out to you about. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Nafi, what did you once believe about yourself, leadership, or both that you now view differently?
I think the biggest thing is probably the thing that comes. Somebody once said to me, leadership is about getting people on the same page.
Mm,
But I actually now think leadership is about making the page bigger. Like, I think I've learned you need people that are different from you. And if you can create a space that allows for some divergence, difference, debate, that is actually more effective than trying to kind of persuade everybody to kind of fall in line with the same idea. So yeah, I think that's recently been the biggest kind of revelation to me of um perhaps reaching a point where I always was kind of more the insurgent coming in with new ideas, trying to challenge the status quo, and then getting to a point where I'm looking around and I'm wanting that from others, and realizing that I actually have to. I'm now no longer the challenger. I've become the status quo in certain areas, and I need people to challenge me, and yeah, how to broaden the tent, I guess. It's
yeah,
probably my biggest mindset shift.
yeah, good, good. Thank you for that. All right, so before we conclude, before we wrap up our conversation, would you like to share maybe just any other thought, idea, quote, or takeaway to leave with our watchers and listeners?
I think there's so much prejudice in the world about what certain types of people can or can't do. And I think the biggest thing that I have to fight against is the messages of prejudice that have held back people here. And I always say to people, whenever somebody says this person can't do X, they can't do certain role, they can't learn this skill because they're too old, they're too young, they're from the north, they're from the south, they're a man, they're a woman, they're whatever. I always just say, just ignore it. That's complete nonsense. Like, it's uh anyone can learn anything with the right support, the right training, the right environment. And I think, yeah, that is what I think is the amazing, powerful um kind of evidence of that you can see in the women of Starfish Project.
Yeah,
Whatever your background, whatever you've been through, it doesn't matter. If you study, if you learn, if you try, you can grow. And yeah, I'd love for more people to believe that about themselves.
good. Thank you, Nafi. Uh, And thank you for joining me in conversation, for being so generous, for giving your time, for sharing some of your experience. And I'm absolutely confident that those listening, watching will get some real inspiration and some value from what you've shared. I will, as I said, I'll share any social links that are relevant to you in the description so that people can find you, connect with you, etc., etc. So for anyone watching or listening, I hope you found my conversation with Nafi really insightful. I've no doubt you would have done. Please subscribe, click a like, give a comment, and we'll see you again sometime soon. Cheers. Don't worry, Nafi. You just chill for a minute. And I'm going to say that again because I didn't like the way I did that. Oh my gosh, what is going on? I know you're going to laugh. Maybe this is one for the outtakes.